Joe does know turf, and many other things in life, and Matt has actually told him, in certain terms, what all he knows. So, yeah, that's happened. But regardless, tonight,
Sure.
watching a video from I would consider him a friend on the show. We've invited him on the show at least a handful of times. I know it just schedules haven't lined up, things like that. But tonight, want to take a look at a video regarding GRUB preventative application timing from Brian, the turf mechanic, and talk a little bit about some best practices. I think we watched a video on Grubs a little while ago, but there's some good points in here that I think were ancillary to the other discussion we have. So let's go ahead and dive in and watch this. J Pink, we'll play it till about 7 or so minutes. I'll let you know when to stop.
The month of June is the most common time of the year to put down grub control. These are the products that we put down to prevent grubs from infesting our lawns in the fall and the spring. And arguably, the most common product that homeowners and yard owners put on their lawns to prevent grubs is Scott's GRUB X. And I want to tell you why you may be making an enormous mistake. During the month of June, adult female grubs burrow deep into the ground to lay their eggs. This usually happens somewhere around the 15th of June, mid-June. On average, you can expect baby grub larvae to start emerging from those eggs 2 weeks later, somewhere around the 1st of July. So in an ideal environment, which is impossible to achieve in real life, every single grub larva would hatch on July 1st and start eating in those first couple days of July. This is when they would be the easiest to kill. So if we apply a product to the surface of our lawn on July 1st, trying to kill off that larva, no matter what the product is, it's not going to do anything until the product gets from the surface of our lawn deep into the soil where the larvae are actually living. GRUB X is a granular product. When we spread it on the lawn with our granular spreaders, it goes onto the dirt. Even if there are baby grub larvae living below the soil surface, they're not going to die because of this product until this product is able to push through that upper inch or two of soil to get down to them. It is a death by contact product. When the larvae come in
Pause.
contact.
What?
Okay. All right. Hang on here. So, a couple of points that Brian makes, and I think some of these are valid and some of these need cleaned up a little bit, but some things to think about here. So, he's talking about the timing of grub applications, and we'll dive into that here towards the end and talk about some of the research that supports why certain products are timed at certain times, things like that. We'll get into that later. What Brian does make a really good point about is, getting the active ingredient to the target, right? This is a major problem that I see, and I'm sure Matt and Ray would agree with me. A major problem that we see with preventative grub
Mhm.
applications, regardless of whether they're granular or if they are liquid, right? And especially if you're in a space, in the pro lawn care space right now, you're probably getting ready to or already putting this stuff out. And if you're in, certain parts of the country, there's not a lot of rain happening right now, and that could be a problem, right? To get your if you're making a midicloprid application right now, could be a problem, right? Related to getting AI on target. So let's listen here a little bit more about the one thing too that he said too was interesting about the chlorantionilpril, right? So two different modes of action here. He'll talk about a midicloprid here in a minute, and we'll listen on that. But with the diamide, right? That's the type of chemical that we're talking about with chlorantionilpril. That actually works by going up into the plant, and then the grubs feed on the plant roots, and then they ingest that and they die. And the way that chlorantionilpril works, Ray, right, is it
Yep.
dissociates calcium ions in the exoskeleton of the plant. So really, what ends up happening, right, from a true mode of action is the mouth parts of the plant when the grub first ingests these diamides, they work rather quickly, right? Once they're in the plant,
See,
and
mhm.
it's a pretty instantaneous process where uh basically like opening a window and all these calcium ions pour out and the grub becomes paralyzed until it stops moving and dies.
Well,
Okay.
first their mouth parts are paralyzed, and
Hmm.
then, from what people have told me, the entire exoskeleton of that poor grub or caterpillar then proceeds to just disintegrate. Calcium
Well, there you go.
dissociation is a pretty effective means of action, and it's also very selective.
Well,
because
and
if
that
you don't,
point, Matt. I was going to ask Matt a quick question. Matt, do humans or our pets have exoskeletons? Yes or no?
No.
Very good. Okay, so it's pretty safe for humans. All right, Ray, you were going to finish your thought, and then we'll play the video here.
Fact,
Oh, Ray,
no,
Ray,
actually,
Ray,
I
Ray,
think
you good?
Matt covered it. Matt covered it quite well.
There you
Let's
go.
roll it.
to the
Let's roll
that.
chlorantraniliprole, which is the active ingredient in GRUB X, that's when they die. Grubs don't come to the surface. They only live down below it. So the only way to get this product down to the grub larva is to water it in. The problem with chlorantraniliprole is that it's not water soluble. Now, it doesn't bind to soil particles, so it will eventually
What?
move down. But no matter how heavy
Pause.
you water,
Okay, a couple of things here. He's right that it is a very water insoluble product. In fact, so much so that if you go on the Scott's website, or if you go read a professional label for a Celiprin, right, which has the same active ingredient, what you'll find is that the timing that's recommended is spring to early summer. Now, they're not going to give you months of the year, they're not going to give you firm dates, but generally speaking, yes, they would like you to apply this earlier, Ray, mainly because of the water insolubility of the actual AI, right? So the more water, the more chance it has to get down in the soil. That being said, we'll talk more again here soon about the timing of these products and how that might relate to it. Now, again, the last part here that he's going to talk about in a second is the imidacloprid and the timing there. So let's go ahead and
the
roll
lawn, you're
that.
not really going to be pushing it down into the larva living zone. Like where they live is not going to happen very fast. So in the month of June, when most people are going out to their local big box store, buying Scott's GRUB X and spreading it on their lawn, it takes a long time for this product to actually get into the root zone of our grass where the grub larvae are living. By the time it actually gets down there, if you're applying this in mid-June, it might not be getting down into the kill zone until early August. And heaven forbid you put this down somewhere around July, it's not going to be getting down into the kill zone until mid to late August. At that point, many of those grubs will have matured to the point where this product won't kill them off. The optimal time of the year to apply Scott's GRUB X or any product using chlorantraniliprole as its active ingredient is in May, possibly even late April. Even if you apply this early into the egg laying zone, into that larva zone, and it won't degrade enough over time to not work, you can apply this a little bit early, but you can't apply it late. That is literally the biggest mistake.
Okay, so he's about to say that's literally the biggest mistake. All right, so he's right on the timing, like that in a general sense across much of the nation. And again, there's some nuance there depending on where you're at, but generally speaking, that time frame is going to work just fine. You can be early with this stuff and still be okay. What you lose out on, let's talk about this real quick, is if you are in an area that is affected by armyworms, let's say, right? Exceptionally good control on armyworms with the Celiprin, right? Except if you're in Hawaii and you can't get it. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's the problem, though, is that if we go too early, we're not going to pick those armyworms up, and that could also be a disastrous consequence.
False.
All right.
False, Ryan.
How's that?
Because, okay, chlorantraniliprole, once it has mobilized itself to the root system of a plant, is extremely systemic. And when I say extremely systemic, what that means is that as long as that AI is present in the soil and circulating through the tissues of the plant, fall armyworm or sod warbworm that bites grass that has had a previous application of chlorantraniliprole, bye Felicia, bye.
All right.
I mean,
fair
from that
enough.
first
And
bite,
is that at the low rate too? Is that true at the low rate too?
No, it is at the middle to higher rates, especially if this is the first time you're applying GRUB X.
Okay.
Because we talked about how GRUB X or chlorantraniliprole has this unique property of applications over multiple consecutive years tend to stack. And that's actually one of the reasons why Hawaii Department of Health doesn't want chlorantraniliprole in Hawaii.
Same thing if you're on Long Island too. You're not going to find this product. So
Right.
that is both a benefit, a feature, and a detractor, right? Is that the half-life of this product in the soil is about 972 days. That's the half-life.
however,
So it hangs around for a
however,
really, really long time. Yes.
however, for me, I'm unconcerned because I don't have an exoskeleton. My cockatiel doesn't have an exoskeleton. Your dog doesn't have an exoskeleton. Your cat doesn't have an exoskeleton. So birds don't have an exoskeleton. So they are not negatively impacted. And oh, by the way, fish don't have an exoskeleton either. Over. They don't.
They don't. So there you go. So it's very safe on all of those. So all right, let's play this here. Let's watch just a little bit longer, and we'll wrap up.
That almost everyone who applies this product does. They apply it too late. And I understand the bag says that you can apply this all the way into July, but it's just not the advisable thing to do. You're applying it late in the season, you are wasting your time and your money. I've made that mistake myself on my own lawn, and I even have a video from a couple years ago where I made the mistake in saying that this could be applied all the way to late June, the 1st of July. If you're going to apply this, apply it at the correct time of year. If it's actually...
Okay, so J-Pink, I'd like you to go first here. This is a really well-researched subject, right? And there's two interesting charts of data that we'll look at that I think will be representative both of cool season country and also of warm season country as well. And so go ahead, J-Pink. Let's look at the first one, that photo I sent you, and then we'll look at the PDF, the first PDF I sent. Okay, so blow this up. So this is data out of Ohio State, going back to 2012, and I can tell you that these model runs, here you go. This is from 77 to 2012. So this is literally every year, and they're looking at each one of these in the totality that they've studied it, right? And if we want to focus in on two different products here, okay, we've got imidacloprid, which is going to be the fourth one down on this chart, and we're also going to look at chlorantraniliprole, which is the second one down on this chart. The interesting thing here that they did, gentlemen, is that they took applications and they made them by month to see, okay, hey, what's late, what's early? Do we see any statistically significant differences in the amount of control on grubs? And the thing that everybody needs to realize is that the goal of grub control, just like in disease control, and to a lesser extent weed control, is all about reducing the numbers and the populations to a viable threshold that's not going to injure turf grass, right? We're not going to kill 100% of the grubs. You're going to see grubs in there. Brian even mentions that in the video, and it's a great point to drive home. At the end, he talks about that, and I think that's an important point to mention. Now, that being said, if we look at May app, a June app, or a July app, Matthew, you're our stats nerd here. Do you see any differences statistically that are indicated here for chlorantraniliprole on whether we make an application in May, in June, or July?
Hardly anything I would consider statistically significant.
Very good. Okay. Now, when we look at applications of imidacloprid, right, here's where we start to see some differences, and I'll tell you why. And actually, I'll have Ray tell you why. Ray, when I look at the May timing here on the imidacloprid, right, I'm seeing 79, 81% control, right, on average.
Yes.
But if I slide that up to a July timeframe, 95, 96%. Now, why would that be the case? Because he hasn't discussed imidacloprid yet. I'll let him talk about that in just a second. But why would we see such stark differences between a May application of aceleprint or chlorantraniliprole versus a May application of Merit, and vice versa? Why do we see such similar results if we made a July application of each one of those products, even though Brian says we're being late if we're targeting this in a June-July timeframe? Why would that be?
It is because imidacloprid, true to its class of chemistry, is rather water-soluble. However, it is not the most water-soluble out of all of the neonicotinoids. That title goes to thiamethoxam. But the main point about imidacloprid is that imidacloprid half-life in the soil, especially at the rates that are registered for annual application to turf grass, on average, you get approximately 60 to 90 days of actual effective half-life out of that application. So I'm looking at an application in May, and that is like low because by the time peak grub damage is occurring, you're into July, and that imidacloprid has degraded. That imidacloprid, if you're in an area that is particularly rainy or is under heavy irrigation, that application tends to wash out or leach out as well.
Very
Rain
good. So it's a
will leach it.
much more water soluble product. The thing I will give Brian about that maybe, perhaps, and this is just me hypothesizing, purely anecdotal, but the possible reason for failure, and I do see it here. I've seen folks make this mistake of June and July applications where maybe they aren't getting as much rain. They're in a more arid climate or a climate that doesn't see as much rain in June, July, and therefore, again, that product does not move adequately into the target area, get uptaken by the plant, and move about. All right, J Pink, real quick, flip over to that first PDF that I sent you, the one out of Oklahoma State. Another really, really good example. We'll slide down to the data table therein. So, gentlemen, here they took a couple different timings. I think that was like a July timing and then an April timing. So they just picked 2 months and kind of went with it and did a couple different applications. So the ones I want you to look at here are again, the acelepryn, which is chlorantraniliprole, same exact rate that you're going to see here at the 0.104 pounds of AI per acre. So that's the equivalent rate of the bag rate on GrubX. And you'll see here, pretty much everything statistically lines up that if we were late on the acelepryn, 93% reduction in populations. If we were early on our acelepryn at that same rate, 90% reduction, right? So there is some variability there. So 93 versus 90.7, you know, that's splitting hairs. It's not statistically significant. Even the
Plus
data,
minus,
right? You know,
plus
here,
minus 5%. Yeah.
right. The data here doesn't even suggest that it's statistically significant. So again, we're seeing that in a July application, and this is on Bermuda grass in Oklahoma, right? This is where this was conducted on. So warm season turf. We see the same thing bear out as what we saw in Ohio and the Midwest. All right, let's play the video here for just another couple of minutes or minute or so, and then we'll wrap this up.
Mid to late June, and you're considering putting down a grub preventative product, this should not be one of your options. You should be looking into something using imidacloprid,
which I don't usually advise, aside from a few sets of circumstances.
I don't advise because it's not very good for all of the beneficial insects that live in our lawns and our environments and communities. And you're going to find imidacloprid in a number of products. I have this lawn grub control from Ike's company. I think you can buy this at Walmart. But it also comes in a very popular product from BioAdvance. It's their BioAdvanced lawn grub control, I think is all it's called. Imidacloprid is water soluble. So once you put it on the lawn and then you...
Okay. Imidacloprid is a fine product to use. It's caught in a bad rap because it's a neonicotinoid. There's a number of situations where I would not advise applying it. That would be if you have weeds that are flowering and pollinators present. That's probably the most dangerous situation that you could get yourself into.
Yes.
Outside of that, from a standpoint of overall human health, the science remains a little bit murky there as far as what the actual intended versus non-intended effects are of that product. The last thing is Brian does mention, and we'll stop right here. We're not gonna. He talks about Lawn Box as a product that is BT, right? So Bacillus thuringiensis, that is supposedly a natural product. J Pink, real quick, slide up, and there's a PDF I linked from the USGA. The BT products very, very inconsistent in their performance in research trials, and also from anecdotal performance as well. If you want to read this paper, Albrecht Koppenhofer out of Rutgers University over there in New Jersey, probably one of the preeminent guys that's doing work on these. So these parasitic nematodes for grub control, the scarabi, I can't remember what the subspecies is, but some really, really good stuff here. We'll link this up in the show notes. You can take a look at this. But in certain parts of the country, Connecticut for one, where they're not allowed to use these pesticides on school grounds, this is sort of the product of choice, and it's done very, very well. Timing of it can be a little bit hokey, depending on weather and populations, irrigated versus non-irrigated. The last thing, too, Ray, real quick, because we talked about grubs and all this stuff a bunch. I hope we cleared up a few things. One, timing is really, really important to a certain extent, right? Acetylprin
Yes.
and the diamides have made it much more idiot-proof when it comes to that. I think the next game changer that we'll see is Tetrino when it becomes available and pregnated on pearls of fertilizer, because that way your timing matches up perfectly. It's a more water-soluble diamide. It's going to match up perfectly where everybody's round 3 or 4 is with their grub control, and it'll be lights out and be over at that point. The other thing too is that you know, grubs are an interesting thing where drier soils, we're not going to see egg lay be quite as bad because grubs need moist soils to get into and lay their grubs. So if you're in an area right now that's especially experiencing drought and you're thinking about applying this stuff, one, be sure that you can water it in, but two, realize that if you're in a droughty situation, the likelihood that you see grubs or the populations and levels that you're used to is probably going to be reduced or diminished to a certain extent. So keep that in mind and take it for what it's worth. So Ryan put out a video. We cleaned up a few things that, I think were good sound advice and, had the research to back it up. So hopefully everybody enjoyed it. It was an extended cut and Matt was here for all of it.
Thank you for watching this clip. Be sure to tune in to the Burn and Return podcast on any of your favorite podcast apps every Wednesday, where we discuss the industry's hottest news.